Your boy has my daughter's eyes, Alien Queen told the human janitor. Then she saw the birthmark. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The vast hallways of Celestial Station Omega 7 gleamed under artificial light, revealing both their splendor and their dirt. Blake Turner moved his mop across the polished floor with practiced efficiency, the blue cleaning solution leaving perfect streaks in its wake. Blake had been the head janitor on Omega 7 for 6 years, ever since humanity had been granted the dubious privilege of maintaining the cleanliness of the Galactic Confederation stations. Humans were newcomers to the interstellar community, and while their application for full membership remained under eternal review, they had quickly earned a reputation for being excellent at manual labor, particularly cleaning. "The dirty species cleans best" was a common joke among the Taurians, the bull-like aliens who controlled most of the administrative positions. Blake had heard it so many times that it had lost its sting. Or at least, that's what he told himself. Today was different, though. The station was buzzing with unusual activity. The majestic Lumina, flagship of the Caldarian Empire, had docked unexpectedly during the night. The Caldarians were among the most advanced and enigmatic species in the Confederation, with skin that shimmered like opals and eyes that seemed to contain galaxies. They rarely ventured to outposts as remote as Omega 7. As Blake finished mopping the eastern corridor, he noticed a small group of station security officers rushing toward the diplomatic wing. Curious, he followed at a discreet distance, pushing his cleaning cart ahead of him as a pretense. "The Queen herself is on board," one officer whispered to another. "This isn't just a diplomatic visit. She's searching for something." Blake's heart skipped a beat. The Caldarian Queen here? Her appearances outside her homeworld were so rare that most considered them mythical. Blake had only ever seen her in broadcasts, her luminescent form towering over her subjects, her voice resonating with authority and ancient wisdom. He shouldn't care about alien politics. His job was to clean, collect his paycheck, and provide for his son Ethan, now 7 years old. Being a single father was hard enough without getting involved in the complex dance of interstellar diplomacy. But something about this visit felt important, like a shift in the air before a storm. Blake finished his shift without further incident and returned to his modest quarters in the human residential section of the station. His neighbor, Madison Grant, was waiting outside his door with Ethan. "Hey, Blake," Madison said, her smile warm but tired. She worked in hydroponics and often watched Ethan when Blake's shift ran long. "Your boy was perfect as always. We read some stories, and he showed me his latest drawing." Ethan looked up, his unusual eyes catching the light. They were deep violet with flecks of silver, so unlike Blake's ordinary brown. The doctors had called it a rare genetic mutation, but they had found no negative health effects, so Blake had stopped worrying about it years ago. "Thanks, Madison. I appreciate it," Blake said, ruffling his son's dark hair. "Did you thank Miss Grant, Ethan?" "Thank you," Ethan said politely, his voice soft but clear. "I drew the stars today." "He certainly did," Madison replied, handing Blake a drawing. "He's got quite an imagination. Those don't look like any constellations I've ever seen." Blake glanced at the drawing. Intricate patterns of stars connected with precise lines, forming complex geometric shapes. It wasn't the first time Ethan had drawn such patterns. His artwork had always been unusually sophisticated for his age. After Madison left, Blake prepared a simple dinner from their station rations. As they ate, Ethan was quieter than usual. "Everything okay, buddy?" Blake asked. Ethan poked at his food. "Dad, why do the other kids say I look weird?" Blake's heart sank. This wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation. "You don't look weird, Ethan. You look special. Your eyes are beautiful. But no one else has eyes like mine. Not even you." "That's what makes them special," Blake said, reaching across the table to squeeze his son's hand. "You know how we talked about your mom? How she had to go away before you were born? Well, sometimes I think your eyes might come from her side of the family." It wasn't a complete lie. Blake had always told Ethan that his mother was gone, just not that Blake had no idea who she actually was. 7 years ago, Blake had woken up in his quarters with a splitting headache and fuzzy memories of the night before. Next to him had been a baby, just hours old, with a note that simply read, "His name is Ethan. He is yours. Protect him." DNA tests had confirmed that Blake was indeed the father, but there was no record of the mother anywhere in the station's database. Blake had chosen to keep the mysterious circumstances of Ethan's arrival private, fearing that his son might be taken away for study if the truth were known. "Will I ever meet her?" Ethan asked, as he always did when the subject came up. "I don't know, buddy," Blake answered honestly. "But you have me, and I'm not going anywhere." Later that night, after tucking Ethan into bed, Blake studied his son's drawing more carefully. The star patterns seemed almost familiar, like something he'd seen in a dream. He shook his head. He was being fanciful, letting the rumors of the Caldarian Queen's visit fire his imagination. The next morning, Blake was assigned to clean the high-security meeting rooms in the diplomatic wing. It was unusual. Humans weren't typically allowed in sensitive areas during important visits, but several of the non-human cleaning staff had called in sick with a strange virus. "Don't mess this up, Turner," his supervisor, a gruff Taurian named Varkas, warned him. "The Caldarians are extremely particular about cleanliness. One speck of dust, and they'll have us all fired." Blake nodded, keeping his expression neutral. He'd dealt with Varkas's bullying for years. The Taurian seemed to take personal offense at Blake's competence, as if a human being good at anything was an insult to the established order. As Blake polished the gleaming table in the main conference room, the door suddenly slid open. He turned, expecting Varkas with another unnecessary critique, but froze when he saw who had entered. For Caldarian royal guards, their armor shimmering with an inner light, stepped into the room. Behind them came a figure that seemed to bend reality around her, taller than the others, her skin shifting through colors like the surface of a soap bubble, her movements fluid and graceful beyond human capability. Queen Alara of the Caldarian Empire. Blake immediately dropped to one knee, head bowed, as all station staff had been instructed to do in the presence of visiting dignitaries. His heart hammered in his chest. He shouldn't be here. This room should have been cleared before her arrival. "Leave us," the Queen said to her guards, her voice melodic and multi-layered, as if several people were speaking in perfect harmony. The guards hesitated. "Your Majesty, protocol dictates." "Leave us," she repeated more firmly. After a moment of uncertainty, the guards bowed and exited the room. Blake remained frozen in his position, not daring to look up or move. "Rise, human," the Queen said, addressing him directly. Blake stood slowly, keeping his eyes lowered respectfully. "I apologize for my presence, Your Majesty. I was assigned to prepare this room. I'll leave immediately." "Look at me," she commanded. Reluctantly, Blake raised his gaze to meet hers. The Queen's eyes were unlike those of the other Caldarians he had glimpsed from a distance. They were deep violet with flecks of silver, exactly like Ethan's. The Queen's multifaceted expression shifted to one of shock. She stepped closer, studying Blake's face with an intensity that made him want to step back. But protocol demanded he remain still. "What is your designation?" she asked. "Blake Turner, Your Majesty, head of janitorial services for the Eastern Quadrant. And your offspring?" Her voice had lost some of its melodic quality, taking on an urgent edge. Blake hesitated. How did she know he had a child? "I have a son, Your Majesty." The Queen moved even closer, her shimmering form now just inches from him. Up close, her beauty was almost painful to behold, like staring at a star. "Your boy has my daughter's eyes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Blake's mind reeled. What was she saying? It wasn't possible. Humans and Caldarians were completely different species, from different evolutionary paths, different worlds. I don't understand, Your Majesty," he stammered. The Queen's hand moved toward his face, hovering just above his skin without touching. "Where is the child now?" "In school, Your Majesty. The station's educational facility." She nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "You will bring him to me. Tonight. The royal chambers on level 6. Come alone." Before Blake could respond, The Queen turned and glided toward the door. But then she paused, looking back at him with an unreadable expression. Did the child come with any markings? Any unusual features beyond the eyes? Blake swallowed hard. There was one thing, a birthmark on Ethan's right shoulder. A complex, swirling pattern that doctors had been unable to identify as any known human birthmark type. He'd always kept it covered, instinctively protecting his son from more unwanted attention. Yes, he admitted. A birthmark on his shoulder. The Queen's form seemed to shimmer more intensely for a moment. "Show me your right shoulder," she demanded. Confused but unable to refuse a direct request from the Queen, Blake slowly rolled up his sleeve, revealing his own shoulder. There, barely visible against his skin, was a faint pattern, the same swirling design that marked his son, though much lighter, as if it had faded over time. The Queen's eyes widened. "Then it is true," she breathed. "The prophecy of the star-born child." "Prophecy? Your Majesty, I don't." "Tonight," she interrupted. "Bring the child. All will be explained." With that, she swept from the room, leaving Blake alone with his racing thoughts. Blake somehow finished his shift in a daze, his mind spinning with questions. The Queen's words made no sense. Humans and Caldarians couldn't have children together. It was biologically impossible. And what prophecy was she talking about? The whole encounter felt like a strange dream. But the urgency in the Queen's voice had been real, and the connection she'd made to Ethan's eyes couldn't be coincidence. Blake had always wondered about their unusual color, so unlike his own or any human he'd ever met. When he picked Ethan up from the station school, he studied his son's face more carefully than ever. The violet eyes with silver flecks, the slightly higher cheekbones than most humans, the unusual grace with which he moved. Had Blake been blind all this time? "Dad, you're staring," Ethan said, breaking Blake's reverie. "Sorry, buddy. Just thinking about how fast you're growing up," Blake said, forcing a smile. "Hey, how would you feel about an adventure tonight?" Ethan's eyes lit up. "What kind of adventure?" Blake chose his words carefully. "We've been invited to meet someone important. Someone who might know about your mother." Ethan's expression shifted from excitement to serious contemplation, displaying that uncanny maturity that sometimes unnerved Blake. "The lady with the shiny skin? The one who came on the big ship?" Blake froze. "How do you know about her?" Ethan shrugged. "I saw her in my dream last night. She was calling me. She said she's been looking for me for a long time." A chill ran down Blake's spine. This was getting stranger by the minute. "Yes, that's who we're going to see. But Ethan, this has to be our secret, okay? No telling anyone, not even Ms. Grant." Ethan nodded solemnly. "I know, Dad. It's important. The stars said so." Blake wanted to ask what his son meant by that cryptic statement, but they had reached their quarters. As they entered, Blake's communication device chimed with an incoming message. It was from the station's security chief, requesting his immediate presence. "Change of plans, buddy. I need to go talk to someone first. You stay here and work on your homework, okay? Lock the door behind me and don't open it for anyone but me." Ethan nodded, looking disappointed but understanding. Blake hugged him tightly before leaving, unable to shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The security chief's office was on the administrative level. Chief Renard, one of the few humans in a position of authority on the station, looked up from his desk as Blake entered. "Turner, take a seat," Renard said, his expression grave. "You had direct contact with the Caldarian Queen today." It wasn't a question. Blake nodded, sinking into the chair across from Renard. "She came into the conference room while I was cleaning." "Sir, I didn't." Renard held up a hand. "I know it wasn't your fault, but I need to know exactly what she said to you." The Taurians are in an uproar. The Queen dismissed all her guards and the diplomatic team for a private audience with a human janitor. You can imagine how that's playing out. Blake hesitated. His instinct was to protect Ethan, to keep him away from the politics and potential danger of this situation. But lying to the chief could make things worse. "She asked about my son, sir. She wants to meet him. Tonight." Renard's eyebrows shot up. "Your son? The boy with the unusual eyes?" Blake stiffened. "You know about his eyes?" "Turner, I'm head of security. I know about everyone on this station. Renard leaned forward. What I don't know is why the Queen of the Caldarian Empire would be interested in a human child, she said. Blake swallowed hard. She said he has her daughter's eyes. Renard sat back, his expression stunned. That's impossible. Cross-species reproduction isn't. He stopped, studying Blake more carefully. Unless there's something you're not telling me about your son's origin. Blake explained the mysterious circumstances of Ethan's appearance, the DNA test confirming Blake as the father, and the absence of any record of the mother. As he spoke, Renard's face grew increasingly troubled. Turner, do you understand what this could mean? If there's any truth to this, if your son is somehow connected to Caldarian royalty, this could have massive implications for human-Caldarian relations, for humanity's standing in the Confederation. My only concern is my son's safety, Blake said firmly. Renard nodded slowly. Fair enough, but you need to be careful. The Queen's visit hasn't been officially explained, but rumors are circulating that she's searching for something, or someone, valuable enough to bring her personally to this backwater station. He paused. There are also whispers about a Caldarian prophecy, something about a star-born child who will bridge worlds. Blake's mind flashed to Ethan's drawings of star patterns, to his cryptic comment about the stars. What do you know about this prophecy? Not much. The Caldarians keep their spiritual beliefs private. But I do know they've been sending search parties across Confederation space for the past 7 years, ever since the Princess Lyra disappeared without a trace. 7 years. Exactly how long ago Ethan had appeared in Blake's quarters. Sir, what should I do? She ordered me to bring Ethan to her tonight. Renard considered this. You don't have much choice. A direct royal command can't be ignored without serious diplomatic consequences. But I'll be monitoring the situation. He scribbled something on a small device and handed it to Blake. This is a direct line to me. If anything seems wrong, activate it immediately. As Blake left the security office, his mind was racing. If what the Queen suggested was true, if Ethan was somehow connected to Caldarian royalty, what did that mean for his son? For their life together? He returned to their quarters to find Ethan sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by drawings of the same star patterns he'd been creating for years. But these were different, more detailed, more urgent somehow. And in the center of the largest drawing was a figure that looked unmistakably like the Caldarian Queen. Ethan, what are you drawing? His son looked up, those violet eyes suddenly seeming alien. The map home, Dad. She's waiting for us. Blake felt a chill run down his spine. Buddy, there's something I need to tell you before we go. Something about where you came from. Ethan smiled, a smile too knowing for a 7-year-old. It's okay, Dad. I already know I'm different. I've always known. What do you know, Ethan? I know my mother isn't like other mothers. I know she's far away, but she's been looking for me. And I know you've always protected me, even when you were scared. Ethan stood up and took Blake's hand. But it's time to stop hiding now. Blake knelt down to his son's level. Ethan, no matter what happens tonight, no matter what we find out, I want you to remember one thing. You are my son. Nothing will ever change that. Ethan hugged him fiercely. I know, Dad. And you're my father. That won't change either. As the station's artificial day cycled dim to evening, Blake and Ethan made their way to level 6. They passed few people in the corridors, unusual for that time of day. Blake suspected Renard had arranged to clear their path to avoid unwanted attention. The royal chambers were guarded by Caldarian soldiers who stood impossibly still, their armor gleaming. When they saw Blake and Ethan approaching, they moved in perfect unison to block the entrance. I'm Blake Turner, Blake said, trying to keep his voice steady. The Queen requested my presence with my son. One guard stepped forward, his opalescent face unreadable. He looked down at Ethan, and even through the impassive alien features, Blake could see a flicker of shock when he noticed the boy's eyes. Without a word, the guard stepped aside, allowing them to enter. The royal chambers were unlike anything Blake had seen on the station before. The walls seemed to shift and flow like liquid, displaying scenes of what must be the Caldarian homeworld. Vast cities of crystal and light, oceans that glowed from within, skies filled with dancing auroras. In the center of the main chamber stood Queen Alara, her back to them, looking at a holographic display of star systems. She turned as they entered, her gaze immediately fixing on Ethan. For a long moment, no one spoke. The Queen moved forward slowly, her form seeming to shimmer more intensely. Blake placed a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder, but to his surprise, his son stepped forward on his own, meeting the Queen's gaze without fear. "You've grown so much," the Queen said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded. "I've been waiting for you to find me." The Queen knelt down, bringing herself to Ethan's level, a gesture that Blake suspected was unprecedented for Caldarian royalty. "May I see?" she asked, gesturing to his shoulder. Ethan looked up at Blake, who nodded reluctantly. The boy pulled down the collar of his shirt, revealing the swirling birthmark on his right shoulder. The Queen's breath caught, and she reached out one shimmering hand, stopping just short of touching the mark. "The royal cipher," she said. "There can be no doubt." She looked up at Blake. "And you bear it as well, though faded." "Your Majesty," Blake said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Please explain what's happening. How can my son have anything to do with you? Our species aren't compatible." The Queen rose to her full height. "That is what most believe, yes. It is a belief we Caldarians have encouraged." She moved to a seating area and gestured for them to join her. "What I am about to tell you is known only to the highest echelons of Caldarian society." Blake sat, pulling Ethan close beside him. "The Caldarian people evolved differently than most species in the Confederation," the Queen began. "Our physical form is more adaptable. Under certain circumstances, we can temporarily assume a form compatible with other species. It is an ability we have kept secret for our own protection." Blake's mind reeled. "Are you saying that you—" "Not I," the Queen interrupted. "My daughter, Princess Lyra. 7 years ago, she became fascinated with humans, your resilience, your creativity, your capacity for growth despite your biological limitations. She embarked on a secret research mission to this station, assuming human form to study your people more closely." The Queen's gaze turned distant, her voice tinged with sorrow. She was young and idealistic. She believed that humans were being unjustly marginalized in the Confederation, and she became particularly interested in one human who showed unusual kindness to those of all species. Blake felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. Memories flashed through his mind, fragments of a night 7 years ago, a woman with unusual violet eyes, a conversation about the stars, the feeling that he was talking to someone who saw the universe differently than anyone he'd ever met. "Lyra broke our most sacred laws," the Queen continued. "Contact with other species while in altered form is forbidden. Intimate relations even more so. But she was young, passionate about her beliefs. And then the impossible happened." She looked at Ethan with an expression of wonder. "She conceived a child, a true hybrid, something our scientists had deemed impossible despite our adaptability. When she realized what had happened, she was frightened. She knew the child would be hunted by those who fear what they don't understand. So she made a decision. She left him with me," Blake said softly. The Queen nodded. "She returned to her true form and came to me with the truth. By then, it was too late. The pregnancy was advancing rapidly, faster than either human or Caldarian gestation. Our physicians determined that the child, being neither fully human nor fully Caldarian, was developing according to its own unique timeline." "Where is she now?" Blake asked. "Why didn't she come herself?" Pain flashed across the Queen's features. The birth process for a hybrid child proved more complicated than anticipated. Lyra's life force was severely depleted. She has been in stasis healing for the past 7 years, her consciousness preserved, but her body unable to sustain itself without assistance. Blake felt Ethan tense beside him. "My mother is sick because of me?" the boy asked, his voice small. "No, child," the Queen said quickly. "Your mother made her choices knowingly, and she would make them again. She believed you would be special, a bridge between our peoples." The Queen's gaze shifted to Blake. What she didn't anticipate was the bond you would form with your human father. She believed she would return for you within months, once she had recovered. "But she didn't recover," Blake said. No. Her condition stabilized but did not improve. Until recently. The Queen's expression brightened slightly. 3 days ago, Lyra showed the first signs of true healing. She spoke in her sleep, of her son, of the father who protected him, of a birthmark that would connect them all. Blake subconsciously touched his own shoulder. I don't understand. I never had this mark before Ethan was born. The royal cipher is not just a physical mark, the Queen explained. It's a genetic signature that manifests in those connected to the royal bloodline. When Lyra chose you, when your DNA combined with hers to create this child, you became part of that lineage. The mark appeared because it recognized your role in fulfilling the prophecy. What prophecy? Blake asked, echoing his question from earlier. The Queen waved her hand, and the walls of the chamber shifted to display ancient symbols and star patterns, the same patterns that Ethan had been drawing for years. For millennia, our seers have spoken of a time when the Caldarian people would reach a crossroads, when our isolation would threaten our future. They foretold the coming of a star-born child, born of royal blood and foreign soil, who would bridge worlds and lead our people to a new understanding. Ethan stood up and walked to the wall, tracing the patterns with his finger. I've seen these in my dreams, he said. They're calling me. The Queen nodded. The royal cipher connects all who bear it to our ancestral memory. You have been receiving glimpses of your heritage, even across the vastness of space. Blake watched his son, seeing him in a new light. The unusual maturity, the advanced abilities, the strange knowledge he sometimes displayed, it all made sense now. Ethan wasn't just human. He was something new, something unprecedented. What happens now? Blake asked, his voice thick with emotion. What do you want with him? The Queen turned to face him fully. I want what any grandmother would want, to know her grandchild, to help him understand his heritage. But more than that, I need his help. Lyra is healing, but slowly. Our physicians believe that the presence of her child might accelerate the process. You want to take him? Blake said, a statement rather than a question. I want to help him fulfill his destiny, the Queen corrected gently. And I believe that includes healing his mother. But Blake Turner, I recognize the bond between you and the child. I would not separate a father from his son. Blake felt a surge of hope. What are you saying exactly? I'm inviting both of you to return with me to Caldaria. The boy can begin learning about his Caldarian heritage while maintaining his connection to his human father. And perhaps, in time, Lyra will wake, and the family circle will be complete. It was too much to process. Blake looked at Ethan, who was still tracing the star patterns on the wall, his small face intense with concentration. What do you think, buddy? Blake asked. This is a big decision. It would mean leaving the station, everything we know. Ethan turned, his violet eyes shining with a new understanding. Dad, I've always felt like we were waiting for something. Like there was something more we were supposed to do. He came back and took Blake's hand. I want to meet my mother. I want to help her get better. But I need you to come too. Blake looked from his son to the Queen. If we do this, I have your word that we'll stay together? That Ethan won't be taken from me. The Queen placed her hand over her heart in what appeared to be a solemn gesture. You have my royal oath. The prophecy speaks of bridges between worlds, not the severing of bonds. The child needs both his heritages to fulfill his destiny. As Blake struggled with the weight of the decision, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. The chamber door burst open, and one of the royal guards rushed in. Your Majesty, we must evacuate immediately. Taurian forces are attempting to seize control of the docking bay. The Queen's expression hardened. Explain. Station security intercepted communications suggesting that certain factions learned of the child's existence. They fear the implications of a human Caldarian hybrid with royal blood. They intend to prevent your departure with the child. Blake's heart raced. He looked at the Queen, seeing the same fear reflected in her alien features that he felt himself. We need to go, she said urgently. Now. Blake nodded, pulling Ethan close. Whatever happens, we stay together. The Queen's hand moved to a control panel on her wrist. Always, she agreed. As they rushed from the chamber, Blake realized that the life he had known, The simple existence of a station janitor and single father was over. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and a destiny he couldn't begin to comprehend. But Ethan's hand was warm in his, and for the first time in 7 years, the mystery of his son's origins was being unraveled. Whatever came next, they would face it together, father and son, human and hybrid, standing at the crossroads of two worlds. The corridors of Omega 7 had transformed from familiar pathways into a labyrinth of danger. Blake held Ethan's hand tightly as they followed Queen Alara and her guards through service tunnels rarely used by anyone except maintenance crews. "The Taurians have locked down the main docking bay," reported one of the guards, his voice unnervingly calm despite the situation. "They're claiming a security protocol violation." "And the majestic Lumina?" the Queen asked, her flowing movements unhindered by the narrowing passage. "Still secure, Your Majesty. Captain Nalara has activated defense protocols. No one will board without authorization." Blake glanced down at Ethan, who was keeping pace remarkably well, his expression focused rather than frightened. The boy seemed to understand the gravity of their situation in a way no 7-year-old should. "There's an auxiliary maintenance dock in Section 47B, Blake said, drawing surprised looks from the Caldarian guards. "It's used for repair drones and emergency vehicles. The access tunnels connect directly to where we are now." The Queen studied him with new appreciation. "You know this station well." "I've cleaned every inch of it for 6 years," Blake replied with a shrug. "The maintenance dock isn't designed for vessels as large as yours, but it might have smaller craft we could use to reach your ship." The Queen nodded. "Lead the way, Blake Turner." It felt strange being in charge, having aliens who considered humans inferior now following his directions. Blake pushed the thought aside and focused on the task at hand. He guided them through a series of narrow maintenance tunnels, pausing occasionally to listen for pursuit. "Dad," Ethan whispered as they waited for a guard to check the next junction, "I can feel them." "Feel who, buddy?" "The angry ones. They're searching. They're afraid of what I am." Ethan's violet eyes seemed to shimmer in the dim emergency lighting. "But there's someone helping us too. Someone keeping them away from our path." Before Blake could ask what his son meant, his communication device vibrated. It was the direct line Chief Renard had given him. Blake activated it cautiously. "Turner, it's Renard. Your position's been compromised. Varkas and his security team are heading toward the maintenance sector. They've got orders to detain all of you, especially the boy." "Whose orders?" Blake demanded. "The Taurian Diplomatic Council is claiming the Queen is abducting a human child in violation of Confederation law. It's nonsense, of course. They just want to prevent a human-Caldarian alliance." Renard's voice was tense. "I'm doing what I can to misdirect them, but you need to hurry. There's a security shuttle in Bay 4 of the maintenance dock. Authorization code 7734 Alpha. "Thank you, Chief. Just get the boy to safety, Turner. Something tells me he's more important than any of us realize." The line went dead. Blake turned to the Queen. "We need to move faster. Taurian security is headed this way." They quickened their pace, the Caldarian guards flanking them protectively. Blake was impressed by how silently such large beings could move, like light flowing across water. They reached a sealed doorway marked Maintenance Access. Authorized personnel only. Blake pressed his palm against the scanner, praying his clearance would work. The panel flashed green, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Beyond lay the maintenance dock, a vast, dimly lit space filled with repair drones and small utility vessels. In the distance, Bay 4 housed a sleek security shuttle, its systems already humming with pre-flight checks. "Renard," Blake murmured. The security chief was keeping his promise. They had covered half the distance to the shuttle when the main doors at the far end of the dock burst open. A squad of Taurian security officers charged in, led by Varkas himself. His bovine features were twisted with triumph as he spotted them. "Halt in the name of station security," Varkas bellowed, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. "Queen Alara, you are in violation of Confederation treaty by attempting to remove a human citizen without proper authorization." The Queen stepped forward, her form seeming to grow more luminous with anger. I am removing no one without consent, Varkas of Taurus. This child is of Caldarian royal blood, and his father has agreed to accompany us. You have no jurisdiction. Varkas snorted derisively. A human Caldarian hybrid? Impossible. The boy is clearly a human with a genetic abnormality, nothing more. He will be remanded to station custody for proper study and care. Blake felt a cold fury building inside him. Study? You mean experimentation. You just can't stand the thought of humans having any importance in your precious confederation. Can you, Varkas? The Taurian's eyes narrowed. This isn't personal, Turner. It's about maintaining the established order. Humans are still proving their worth to the galactic community. You're not ready for the privileges that come with connection to an elder race. That's not your decision to make, Blake said firmly. Varkas gestured to his team. Take the boy. Detain the others. The Caldarian guards moved into defensive positions, their armor glinting as they drew weapons unlike any Blake had seen before, rods that emanated a soft, pulsing light. Please, the Queen said, her voice carrying a note of warning. We do not wish bloodshed. Varkas laughed. Bloodshed? Your ceremonial guards against trained security forces? This won't take long. As the Taurian squad advanced, Ethan suddenly stepped forward, slipping free of Blake's grasp. Ethan, no. Blake lunged for his son, but the boy moved with startling speed. Ethan stood between the two groups, his small form somehow commanding attention from beings 3 times his size. He raised his hands, and for an instant, Blake thought he saw the boy's skin shimmer with an inner light, just like the Queen's. Stop, Ethan said, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to fill the entire dock. There will be no fighting here. The Taurian guards froze, their expressions confused. Varkas shook his massive head as if trying to clear it. What is this? Some Caldarian trick? Seize the boy now. The guards tried to move forward but seemed unable to coordinate their movements, stumbling like they were intoxicated. Varkas roared in frustration, charging forward himself. Blake moved to protect his son, but before he could reach Ethan, the boy made a simple gesture with his hand. Varkas stopped in mid-charge, his eyes widening in shock. I said no, Ethan repeated calmly. You're afraid of what you don't understand. I can feel your fear, but you don't need to be afraid of me. The Queen stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. Her expression showed both pride and concern. The royal gift manifests early in this one, she murmured. Lyra will be amazed. Blake stared at his son in awe and trepidation. What's happening? The ability to influence the emotions of others is rare among my people, the Queen explained quietly. It typically develops after decades of training. Your son appears to have an instinctive grasp of it. Varkas seemed to be struggling against an invisible force. This is illegal. Mind control is forbidden by Confederation law. It's not control, Ethan said, sounding suddenly tired. I'm just helping you feel calm instead of angry. But I can't do it for long. As if to emphasize his point, Ethan swayed slightly, and Blake quickly moved to support him. The boy leaned against his father, his face pale. We need to go, Blake said urgently. Now. The Queen nodded. To the shuttle. They made for Bay 4, the Caldarian guards keeping position between them and the momentarily subdued Taurians. Blake could see Varkas beginning to shake off whatever influence Ethan had exerted. They reached the security shuttle just as alarms began blaring throughout the dock. The station's automated voice announced, "Emergency lockdown initiated. All personnel remain in place. Emergency lockdown initiated. They're sealing the dock," one of the guards reported. Blake helped Ethan into the shuttle, then turned to the control panel and entered Renard's authorization code. The shuttle's systems flared to life, displays illuminating the cockpit. Can you fly this? The Queen asked. Blake nodded. Basic piloting was part of station safety training. He didn't mention that he'd only done simulator runs, never an actual flight. But I don't know if we can break through a station lockdown. The Queen touched a jeweled communicator on her wrist. Captain Nalara, this is the Queen. Prepare for immediate extraction from the station's southern quadrant. We have encountered resistance. A melodic voice responded from the device. Understood, Your Majesty. The Lumina is moving into position now. Our sensors detect the maintenance dock shields activating. Can you disable them? Yes, Your Majesty, but it would require weapons fire on the station. The diplomatic implications would be severe. The Queen's expression hardened. The Taurians have already breached diplomatic protocol by attempting to detain royal personnel. Do what is necessary, but minimize damage to station infrastructure. As you command. Blake strapped Ethan into a passenger seat, then took the pilot's position. The shuttle controls were familiar enough from his training, but his hands still shook as he initiated the launch sequence. Behind them, the Taurian security team had recovered and was attempting to breach the shuttle bay doors. Varkas was shouting into a communicator, his face contorted with rage. Launching in 30 seconds, Blake announced, trying to project more confidence than he felt. One of the Caldarian guards approached the Queen. Your Majesty, we have room for only 5 passengers at most. The Royal Guard will remain behind to ensure your escape. The Queen looked pained but nodded. Your sacrifice is noted and will be honored. As the guards bowed and exited the shuttle, Blake felt a wave of respect for their dedication. The door sealed behind them, and the shuttle's engines whined as they powered up to full capacity. Hang on, Blake said, gripping the controls. Outside, the Caldarian guards had formed a defensive line between the shuttle and the advancing Taurians. Their light weapons activated, creating a barrier of shimmering energy. The shuttle rose from its docking clamps, hovering a few meters above the floor. Blake oriented it toward the maintenance dock's external doors, currently sealed by the lockdown protocols. Those doors are reinforced to withstand vacuum, Blake said. We can't blast through them. The Queen's communicator chimed. Your Majesty, we are in position. Preparing targeted strike on the maintenance dock shields. Impact in 5 seconds. A moment later, the entire station shuddered as something struck its southern section. Warning lights flashed throughout the shuttle's cockpit as the dock shields failed. The massive external doors remained closed, but Blake noticed a status change on his display. The lockdown's been partially overridden, he said. Manual control is restored. He activated the external door controls, and with agonizing slowness, the massive panels began to part. Vacuum warning sirens blared throughout the dock. The Taurian guards retreated, securing breathing masks, while the Caldarian guards stood their ground, apparently less affected by the dropping pressure. Now, Blake pushed the throttle forward, and the shuttle shot toward the widening gap. They barely cleared the doors, the shuttle rocking violently as its shields scraped against the partially opened panels. Then they were out, emerging into the star-filled blackness of space. The majestic Lumina waited nearby, its enormous form dwarfing their small craft. The Caldarian flagship was unlike any vessel Blake had seen before, not constructed of metal and composite like Confederation ships, but seeming to flow and pulse like a living organism, its surface shimmering with colors that shouldn't be visible in the vacuum of space. It's beautiful, Ethan whispered, pressing his face against the viewport. Guide your craft to Docking Bay 3, the Queen instructed. The Lara will assist with the approach. As Blake maneuvered the shuttle toward the Lumina, the station behind them bristled with activity. Several security vessels had launched in pursuit. We've got company, Blake warned. They will not reach us in time, the Queen said confidently. True to her word, as they approached the Caldarian vessel, it seemed to open like a flower, a section of its hull flowing aside to reveal a docking bay. Tractor beams gently captured their shuttle, drawing it inside. The moment they were secured, the Lumina's engines flared, and the great ship began to move away from the station at incredible speed. Through the viewports, Blake saw the pursuing vessels growing smaller until they were mere points of light, then nothing at all. Transition to alternate space in 30 seconds, Your Majesty, announced Captain Thalera's voice. The Queen placed a comforting hand on Ethan's shoulder. The first jump can be disorienting. Close your eyes, young one. Ethan nodded, but instead of closing his eyes, he reached for Blake's hand. Stay with me, Dad. Always, Blake promised. The lumina shuddered slightly, and then the stars outside seemed to stretch and bend. Blake felt a moment of dizziness, a sensation like falling in all directions at once. Then it passed, and the viewports showed not stars but swirling patterns of energy and light, the mysterious alternate space that allowed faster-than-light travel. "We are safe now," the Queen said, rising from her seat. "Let us disembark." As they exited the shuttle into the luminous docking bay, Blake was struck by the organic quality of the ship's interior. What had appeared metallic from outside revealed itself as a material unlike anything he'd encountered, warm to the touch, with subtle patterns that seemed to shift and flow when viewed from different angles. Caldarian crew members bowed as the Queen passed, their opalescent faces showing varying degrees of curiosity when they noticed Blake and Ethan. None seemed surprised or disturbed by the human presence, which Blake found reassuring. The Queen led them to what she described as guest quarters, though the spacious, flowing chambers barely resembled any quarters Blake had seen. The furniture seemed to grow from the floors and walls, and the lighting adjusted automatically to a spectrum comfortable for human eyes. "Rest now," the Queen said. "When you are recovered from our hasty departure, we will speak more of what lies ahead. The journey to Caldaria will take approximately 3 of your Earth days." After she left, Blake sat heavily on what appeared to be a bed, the events of the day finally catching up with him. Ethan explored the chambers with typical 7-year-old curiosity, touching the strange surfaces and watching with delight as they responded to his contact, shifting colors and occasionally texture. "Dad," Ethan said finally, coming to sit beside him. "Are you okay?" Blake managed a smile. "Just processing everything, buddy. It's been quite a day." Ethan nodded solemnly. "I did something to those guards, didn't I? Something not normal." The Queen called it the royal gift. Blake put his arm around his son's shoulders. "Apparently it's rare, even among Caldarians. I felt what they were feeling, all their anger and fear, and I just pushed it away." Ethan looked troubled. "I didn't hurt them, did I?" "No, buddy. If anything, you prevented anyone from getting hurt." Blake squeezed his son reassuringly. "But it seemed to take a lot out of you. How do you feel now? Tired, but also more awake? Like part of me was sleeping before, and now it's not." Ethan gestured vaguely at his head. "There are so many new things in here now." Blake felt a pang of concern. His son was changing, accessing abilities and knowledge that Blake couldn't begin to understand. Would there come a point when Ethan would become more Caldarian than human? When he would no longer need his human father? As if reading his thoughts, Ethan hugged him fiercely. "Don't worry, Dad. I'm still me. Just a bit more me than before." Blake hugged him back, marveling at the perceptiveness of this child. His child, regardless of the extraordinary circumstances of his birth. The 3 days aboard the majestic Lumina passed in a blur of new experiences. The Queen arranged for instructors to begin teaching Ethan about Caldarian culture, history, and the basics of their unique biological abilities. To Blake's relief, she invited him to attend all these sessions, never attempting to separate him from his son. "The bond between you is important," she explained when Blake thanked her. "It grounds him in his human heritage, which is equally valuable. The prophecy speaks of a bridge between worlds, not the abandonment of one for another." Blake also received his own education, a crash course in Caldarian social protocols and the political situation he and Ethan would be entering. The Queen was surprisingly forthright about the challenges they would face. "Not all of my people will welcome a hybrid child, even one of royal blood," she admitted. "There are conservative factions who believe in maintaining the purity of our lineage. But they are a minority, and they do not speak for the future of our species." On the final day of their journey, the Queen summoned them to the ship's observation deck. The swirling patterns of alternate space had given way to normal space once more, and through the vast crystal viewport, a planet was visible, Caldaria, the Caldarian homeworld. It was breathtaking, a world of vibrant blues and purples, with swirling cloud patterns that seemed to form deliberate geometric shapes. As they watched, the daylight side gave way to night, revealing cities that glowed with an inner light, connected by flowing lines of energy. "It's just like in my dreams," Ethan whispered, his face filled with wonder. The Queen nodded. "You have been connected to your mother's homeworld since birth, through the royal cipher, and through her consciousness reaching out to you. Will we see her today?" Ethan asked, his voice mixing excitement and apprehension. "Yes, child. Her healing chamber has been prepared for your visit." The Queen's expression softened. She has waited 7 years for this moment. As the Lumina descended through Caldaria's atmosphere, Blake was struck by the alien beauty of the landscape. Unlike Earth's chaotic natural formations, everything on Caldaria seemed to follow complex patterns. Forests grew in perfect fractals, mountains formed precise geometric shapes, and even the flow of water seemed to follow mathematical principles. They landed at what the Queen described as the Summer Palace, though to Blake it looked more like a living sculpture than a building. Towers of crystal and living material that caught the light of Caldaria's sun and broke it into impossible colors. A processional escort waited for them, Caldarian nobles and officials arranged in precise formation. As they disembarked, a murmur ran through the assembled crowd at the sight of Blake and Ethan. The boy, perhaps sensing the intensity of the attention, gripped Blake's hand tightly. The Queen addressed her people in the Caldarian language, a flowing, musical sound that seemed to contain multiple harmonies at once. Though Blake couldn't understand the words, he recognized his and Ethan's names mentioned several times. When she finished speaking, the assembled Caldarians bowed in unison. "I have explained who you are and the significance of your arrival," the Queen told them. "They will honor and protect you as members of the royal household." Blake nodded, feeling distinctly out of place in his station maintenance uniform. Beside him, Ethan stood straighter, seeming to instinctively understand the formality of the occasion. They were led through the palace, which proved even more extraordinary inside than out. The structure responded to the presence of the Queen, pathways forming and chambers opening as she approached. Blake tried not to gape like a tourist, but the technology, if it could even be called that, was so far beyond human capability that it seemed like magic. Finally, they reached a circular chamber deep within the palace. Unlike the bright, open spaces they had passed through, this room was dimly lit, with a soft, pulsing glow emanating from its center. There, suspended in what looked like liquid light, was a female Caldarian, Princess Lyra. Even in her suspended state, her resemblance to Ethan was unmistakable. The same delicate features, the same unusual coloration. Her eyes were closed, but Blake knew without doubt that they would be the same violet with silver flecks that he saw every day in his son's face. Ethan stepped forward without prompting, drawn to the healing chamber as if by an invisible force. He placed his small hand against the barrier, and the liquid light rippled at his touch. "Mother," he said softly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the light surrounding Princess Lyra pulsed more strongly, and her eyes fluttered open. Violet with silver flecks, exactly as Blake had known they would be. The eyes he had fallen for 7 years ago, though he hadn't remembered until this moment. Her gaze found Ethan, and her expression transformed with joy and wonder. Then she looked beyond him to Blake, and her eyes widened in recognition. "Blake," she said, her voice weak but clear, carrying the same melodic quality as the Queen's. "You protected him, as I knew you would." Blake stepped forward to stand beside his son. "He's amazing, Lyra. You should be proud." She smiled, the gesture transforming her alien features into something Blake found hauntingly familiar. "I am. Of both of you." The Queen moved to a control panel beside the chamber. "Lyra has been gaining strength since we discovered Ethan's location. Your presence seems to be accelerating the healing process significantly." She manipulated the controls, and the liquid light began to recede. It should now be safe to complete her emergence. As the suspension field dissipated, Princess Lyra slowly sat up, her movements careful and deliberate. Attendants rushed forward to assist her, but she waved them away, focusing entirely on Ethan. "My son," she said, opening her arms. Ethan looked up at Blake, seeking permission or reassurance. Blake nodded encouragingly, his throat tight with emotion. The boy stepped into his mother's embrace, and as they touched, both of their forms seemed to shimmer briefly with the same inner light. Lyra held Ethan for a long moment, then extended one hand toward Blake. "Join us," she said softly. "Our family should be whole." Blake moved forward and took her hand. The moment they touched, the birthmark on his shoulder, the royal cipher, began to tingle and warm. Memories flooded back, not just of the night he had met Lyra in her human form, but deeper connections, as if her consciousness was sharing itself with him. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth," Lyra said. "It was too dangerous. For all of us." "I understand," Blake replied, and he did. Through whatever connection they now shared, he could feel her fears, her hopes, her love for the child they had created. The Queen watched the reunion with visible emotion. The prophecy unfolds as foretold. The starborn child has returned, bringing with him the promise of new understanding between our peoples. In the days that followed, Blake and Ethan settled into life on Caldaria. Lyra's recovery progressed rapidly, allowing her to take an active role in Ethan's education. The boy proved an extraordinary student, absorbing Caldarian knowledge and developing his unique abilities at a pace that amazed even the Queen's most experienced tutors. Blake worried at first that he would become irrelevant, a human curiosity in an advanced alien court. But Lyra ensured that he remained central to Ethan's life, and to his surprise, Blake found himself becoming something of a cultural ambassador. The Caldarians were genuinely curious about humanity, their preconceptions challenged by the existence of Ethan and the bond he shared with his human father. 6 months after their arrival, the Queen summoned them to the Great Hall of Connection, the central chamber where the Caldarian leadership communicated with representatives of the Galactic Confederation. It was a rare honor for Blake to be included in such proceedings, and he stood nervously beside Lyra and Ethan as the massive communication arrays activated. The holographic forms of the Confederation Council materialized, representatives of 12 elder species, including a Taurian delegate whose disdainful expression suggested he was not pleased by the situation. "Honorable Council," the Queen began, "I have requested this audience to formalize a proposal that will change the future of our collective societies. I present to you my grandson, Ethan Turner Calder, first of his kind, a living bridge between the Caldarian and human species." Ethan stepped forward, his 7-year-old form appearing tiny before the towering holograms of the council members. But he showed no fear, his posture reflecting the royal training he had received. "Greetings, honored representatives," he said clearly. "I come before you as proof that different worlds can join in harmony." The Taurian representative snorted. "This experiment proves nothing except the Caldarians' willingness to dilute their ancient bloodline. What relevance has this to Confederation matters?" The Queen's expression remained serene. "The prophecy that foretold Ethan's birth also speaks of a time when isolation would threaten all our peoples. We stand at that threshold now. The elder races have grown complacent, resistant to change, while newer species like humanity bring fresh perspective and adaptability. You propose to elevate humans to full membership status?" another counselor asked, their tone suggesting the absurdity of the idea. "I propose something more fundamental," the Queen replied. "A recognition that our strength lies in unity, not hierarchy. Ethan represents what is possible when we move beyond our biological differences to recognize our shared consciousness." As if on cue, Ethan raised his hands in a gesture similar to what he had done on the station. But rather than influencing emotions, he projected images, visions of a future where human innovation combined with Caldarian wisdom, where the boundaries between species became pathways rather than barriers. The council members watched in silence, their expressions shifting from skepticism to wonder. Even the Taurian representative seemed momentarily speechless. "How is the child doing this?" one counselor asked finally. "This is beyond known Caldarian abilities." "Because he is not just Caldarian," Lyra said, stepping forward to place a hand on her son's shoulder. He is human as well. His unique genetic structure has created capabilities that exist in neither parent species alone. He is something new, a glimpse of what we might all become through cooperation rather than isolation. Blake watched with pride as his son continued the projection, showing possibilities that even Blake had never imagined. In that moment, he understood what the Queen had meant about destiny. Ethan wasn't just a child of two worlds. He was the beginning of a new future for all of them. The council deliberated for hours after the presentation, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The existence of Ethan and the possibilities he represented was too significant to dismiss. When the decision came, it was historic. Humanity would be granted full membership in the Confederation, with Blake Turner named as the first human ambassador to Caldaria. In the years that followed, Ethan grew into his role as a bridge between worlds. By his 10th birthday, he had mastered control of his unique abilities and begun the formal training that would prepare him to eventually take his place in both human and Caldarian leadership. Blake and Lyra developed their own relationship, not the romantic connection that might have been expected, but a deep partnership based on their shared love for their son and their commitment to the future he represented. Lyra taught Blake about Caldarian culture and biology, while he helped her understand the complexity and creativity of human society. On Ethan's 18th birthday, representatives from Earth and a dozen other human colonies gathered on Caldaria for a celebration that symbolized the new era of cooperation. The once derided cleaning species had become valued partners in the Confederation, their innovative approaches helping to solve problems that had stumped elder races for centuries. As Ethan stood before the assembled dignitaries, now a young man with the bearing of both his heritages, Blake reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a mysterious baby left in his quarters. The station janitor, who had once been invisible to the powerful, had become a key architect of a new galactic order. 18 years ago, my father made a choice, Ethan said in his address. When faced with a child of unknown origin, he chose love over fear, protection over rejection. That same choice now faces all our peoples. We can choose to embrace our differences, to see them as strengths rather than threats. His eyes, still that remarkable violet with silver flecks, swept across the gathered representatives. I stand before you as living proof that the boundaries we perceive are illusions. I am neither fully human nor fully Caldarian, yet I am completely both. And in that paradox lies our greatest hope for the future. The applause that followed was thunderous, representatives of once hostile species rising in unity. Blake caught Lyra's eye across the chamber, sharing a moment of quiet understanding. Their son had indeed fulfilled the prophecy, becoming a bridge between worlds in ways even the ancient Caldarian seers might not have imagined. Later that evening, as the celebrations continued around them, Blake found a moment alone with Ethan on one of the palace's crystal balconies. The three moons of Caldaria cast their multicolored light across the geometric perfection of the landscape, a view that had become as familiar to Blake as Earth's single moon once had been. "Proud of you, kid," Blake said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder where the royal cipher marked him as both heir and harbinger. Ethan smiled, the same smile he'd had as a boy, though now framed by a young man's face. "I was thinking about Omega-7 today. About how you used to mop those endless corridors, and how the Taurians would make those jokes." "Ancient history," Blake said with a shrug. "Not so ancient. An important history." Ethan looked up at the stars, the same stars he had drawn patterns of as a child. "If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't been the kind of person who would accept and protect a mysterious child, none of this would have happened. You give me too much credit. Any decent person would have done the same." Ethan shook his head. "No, they wouldn't. That's the point. It was your humanity, the very quality the Taurians dismissed, that made all this possible." He gestured at the celebration below, where humans and aliens mingled as equals. The janitorial staff aren't invited to diplomatic functions on Omega-7. But here, the janitor's son is the guest of honor, and the janitor himself is an ambassador. Blake laughed. When you put it that way, it does sound pretty remarkable. The Queen, grandmother, told me something when I was younger that I've never forgotten. She said that true power isn't about technology or biology or even knowledge. It's about connection. The ability to see beyond the surface, to recognize the potential in what others overlook. Ethan turned to face his father fully. You saw me as your son, not as an alien or a burden or a science experiment. That choice, that human choice, changed the course of galactic history. Blake felt his throat tighten with emotion. Well, when you put it like that, maybe I should ask for a raise. Ethan laughed, the sound carrying the harmonics of his Caldarian heritage while maintaining the warmth of his human upbringing. I think we can arrange something. As they rejoined the celebration, Blake reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a mop and a maintenance uniform. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony after all. The species considered barely worth noticing had produced the bridge that would unite them all. And it had started with the simplest, most human act of all, a father's love for his son, regardless of where he came from or what he might become. Later that night, after the formal celebrations had concluded, Blake found himself in the royal gardens with Lyra and the Queen. Ethan had gone with some of the younger diplomats to continue the festivities in the city, his dual heritage making him uniquely suited to bridge the formal and informal aspects of interspecies relations. He has surpassed even the prophecy's predictions, the Queen said, watching the distant lights of the celebration. The council is already discussing the possibility of him serving as the first interspecies coordination director. At 18, isn't that a bit young for such responsibility? Blake asked. Lyra smiled. By Caldarian standards, perhaps. But his human adaptability and growth rate have combined with Caldarian longevity and wisdom. He's unique in all the best ways. Blake nodded, feeling a familiar mix of pride and slight melancholy. His son was becoming something greater than he had ever imagined possible. It was everything a parent could hope for, yet it carried the bittersweet knowledge that Ethan's path would take him far beyond his father's modest beginnings. As if sensing his thoughts, Lyra placed her hand on his, the touch sending a warm resonance through the royal cipher on his shoulder. He will always be your son first, Blake. That bond is the foundation of everything he has become. The Queen nodded in agreement. The prophecy spoke of a bridge between worlds, but it did not specify how that bridge would be built. It could have been through conflict or competition. Instead, because of you, it was built through love and acceptance. Blake looked up at the night sky, so different from Earth's, yet now feeling like home. You know, when I was mopping those floors on Omega 7, dreaming of a better life for Ethan and me, I never imagined it would lead here. I just wanted him to have opportunities one didn't have. And now he has opportunities no one has ever had, Lyra said softly. Because you saw him as a son first, not as a hybrid or a prophecy. The simplest choices often have the most profound consequences, the Queen added. When my daughter left her child in your care, she believed you would protect him until she recovered. She never anticipated that you would become as essential to his development as his Caldarian heritage. Blake smiled. Life's funny that way. The Taurians used to joke that humans were only good for cleaning up messes. Turns out, sometimes the person cleaning up the mess is exactly who you need to change everything. As the 3 moons of Caldaria cast their glow over the geometric gardens, Blake Turner, once a simple station janitor, now an ambassador and father to the most important bridge between species in galactic history, realized that the extraordinary journey had just begun. And whatever came next, they would face it together, not as separate species, but as a family that transcended the very concept of difference. Humans, it seemed, had more to offer the galaxy than anyone had realized. Sometimes, it just took the right eyes to see it. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.